Hello friends and welcome back to Silverhawk Farm. We are back in my kitchen and today I have entirely too many tomatoes and too much okra. So we're gonna do something about it and we're gonna make some gumbo. I would like to state the disclaimer up front that I am Midwestern. Kansas is not part of the South and this is definitely a Southern recipe. So I'm making it a combination of how my dad would make it, how I cook with everything, and I'm gonna add okra, which I've never done before because it's growing like madness in my garden. So I braved the tangle of weeds that is my garden this morning and went out and picked some okra, some peppers, some spicy peppers that are actually a paprika blend, and some of my ripened tomatoes. And then I'm supplementing with celery and onion to make sure I'm getting all of those good Cajun flavors in there. So I did the laziest version of chicken broth possible, where you basically just take chicken. I personally decided to use boneless, skinless chicken thighs because thighs are less prone to overcooking. And then I didn't even thaw it. I just put the frozen chicken thighs directly in 8 cups of water, brought it to a boil, and let it simmer for a little bit. After about 30 minutes of simmering, I went ahead and skimmed off any of the imperfections or scum that had come up. You can skip this step, but it's gonna make for a cloudier soup and a less flavorful thing, so I would recommend keeping it in. Once the scum had been cleaned up, I let it simmer for a little while more before removing the chicken, before draining the broth into a fine mesh sieve and setting it aside. Now I'm going to go ahead and get things prepped using all of our vegetables that we have here today. Okra is actually traditional to gumbo, but I haven't ever made gumbo with okra before because I'm Midwestern and we don't usually have okra here. But I grew okra this year and that's kind of what inspired me to make this recipe because I wanted to try making it with okra like it's supposed to be. Now that I have all of my veggies prepped, I'm gonna go ahead and start the roux. And a roux is just a word for a mixture of fat and flour, usually butter. I'm gonna be using equal parts butter and flour and then mixing it until it's nice and dark. For something like gumbo, you want like a dark roux versus like a lighter roux like you would use in some gravies. And so you want it to be kind of like a caramel brown by the time that you're all finished. Once I am done with the roux, I'll go ahead and mix in some of the veggies and let them cook, then add in some of the more tender veggies towards the end before adding the chicken stock and the chicken as well as the sausage and letting it boil just a second before I simmer it for about an hour or 2. So the gumbo is almost finished simmering and we are gonna go ahead and get the rice started. You can totally make rice in a pot. You can find recipes online, but personally, I really like using a very cheap rice cooker. I think I got this for like 20 bucks on Amazon, and ultimately what all you have to do is combine equal parts rice and water for the most part. I like to rinse my rice really well, which can add a little bit of extra water, so I reduce the amount of water by a little bit. So once the rice and the water are combined in the rice cooker with a little bit of salt, I just mix it up a bit, add the lid, and switch it from warm to cook because it's not a fancy rice cooker and it only has those two options. I will say as a tip, if you use something like a rice cooker, I would recommend unplugging it when it goes to warm because it can become a little bit gummy if it stays in that warm setting for too long. So I'm just gonna let that cook, and basically as soon as the rice is ready, I'm gonna call the gumbo ready because it's one of those things that can be really flexible as far as like when it's done. So it's been a lot of work, but we ended up with this delicious bowl of gumbo. I wouldn't necessarily recommend the chicken from broth scenario. It worked really well when I tried it with chicken noodle soup, but with this, because there was an extra braising time, it felt kind of like it ended up a little bit stringy, but ultimately still really delicious. It's a little bit spicier than I expected it to be, and like the absolute best way. And while I am trying to become an okra person, I don't love the sort of slimy texture. And I feel like when it's cooked down like this, it really doesn't have that, and it's just kind of like a lovely vegetable that's added to the mix. So I'm gonna go eat the rest of this off camera because it's absolutely delicious and I'm really excited for it. But I so appreciate you all hanging out with me today and helping me cook some of my harvest, because honestly, that is the best way to preserve. So I hope you treat yourself to something delicious today, and I'll see you real soon. Okay, bye. Onion, I know it's not supposed to be red onion. It's the only onion I have. I'm so sorry, Southerners. I'm sorry. It's what I have. My family's hungry, okay?